What's good, YouTube? How are all my finally free friends and family doing? Hopefully, everybody's doing well. I got a different one for you guys today. I had a subscriber suggest at one point in time that I tell a story that's not strictly limited to prison experience, and I got no issues with that. I got plenty of stories, crazy shit that's happened to me outside of prison, before prison, not so much after prison, but this is actually after prison, but it also goes before prison as well. To make that make sense, what happened was I did somebody really wrong at one point in time, like bad. You know, I did them bad, embarrassed them, humiliated them, made them feel small, powerless, assaulted them physically at gunpoint. you know, I did this person really bad, and they know who I am. They know that I'm responsible, and that became apparent because I ran into them for the first time after I got out of prison. This was like right after I got out of prison too, so my PTSD was really kind of rampant, and I was basically responding to everything like I would inside. And so what happened was we were in a gas station, and he was ahead of me by a couple people. He was paying for his stuff, and I didn't know who he was. This was still during like COVID times and stuff, so everybody's wearing masks or they're not wearing masks. It was kind of like a statement, whether you did or you didn't. It's kind of dependent on where you were, but yeah, I didn't have a mask on, and he did, and he was paying for his stuff, and he turned around and he goes to leave, and that's when he glanced at me, and I glanced at him, and like I said, I didn't recognize him. He was just this really tall white boy with glasses, and he stopped, and I kind of looked at him because I see him looking at me now, so I'm looking at him. And there's literally only a handful of people that I know that are this tall that I would personally know and would recognize me. And so, I'm looking at him, and he pulls his mask down, and he opens his mouth like he's going to say something, and then he doesn't. And then he just put his mask back up, and he turned around slowly, and he walked out the gas station. And I'm like, fuck. I know exactly who that is. And I was like, damn, man. I gotta see this dude head up. I fully intended to, whatever was about to come, whatever was about to unfold, I wasn't gonna run from it. I was going to walk right up to him and say, hey, man, I understand if you feel a certain way, and if you wanna see me, if you wanna go somewhere or whatever, I got you, because I owe you that much. Yeah, I'm not gonna just stand there and let you slap me or punch on me or whatever. You're gonna have to fight for whatever licks you get, but I will agree to see you. And I honestly felt like that was an honor thing. I had to honor whether or not he wanted to fight, and I understood it. And maybe I will kind of half heart fight him. I don't know, but when I walked out of the gas station, he wasn't there. But by then, I had spun myself up so bad that I actually blacked out and like wandered across the street. This was the main street down the one of the main street in the city that I'm from. So I had managed to get across the street, across this really busy like 6-lane highway, or not highway, 6-lane street or whatever, and somehow managed to get over a fence. And I was walking the prison, or not the prison, I was walking the train tracks when I kind of came to, and I was talking to the girl that I was with at the time on the phone, and she was in an entirely different state. And apparently in this kind of blacked out state, I had called her, and she was calming me down. and I had a weed pen on me, and I was like just ripping the shit out of this, and she was like, just breathe, calm down. What happened? And I was like, I'm coming back. I'm like, I'm aware now. I'm aware of what's going on, and I'm looking around, and I'm like, I don't know. I just ran into somebody, and I thought for sure that something would come of it. And I was like, that's the last thing I remember. And she was like, yeah, you called, and you weren't making a lot of sense. And I was like, damn, that's crazy. So PTSD is nothing to play with. It's nothing to play with at all. It's something that is debilitating to some people, and it's nothing to laugh off. It's nothing that you can just sneeze at. I had to take it serious. I had to really take it serious, and I had to, teach myself about this new ailment that I had as a result of, all the things that I had put myself through. Well, what I did to this guy goes all the way back to the tail end of what I would ultimately become indicted for. And that was, conspiracy to possess and distribute a controlled substance and obstruction of justice by retaliation against an informant. And those are, word for word, for verbatim, my charges. That's what's on my indictment. I was at the head of my indictment. That's what I went to prison for, federal prison. I was indicted out of state prison. I was already in state prison when those charges came down. And I knew they were coming. I knew that was going to eventually catch up to me. But I don't even know where to begin. The way this all came about, I was basically testing one of my former associates' loyalty, I guess you could say. Because ultimately what happened was we got caught together. We got followed by some undercovers all day, one particular day. And, we managed to ditch them. And then we got rid of everything. We weren't supposed to have anything on us. And as far as I knew, we didn't have anything on us. We ended up passing a cop. They followed us for a couple miles before they pulled me over and said that I ran a stoplight. And then they said that wasn't the actual reason that they pulled me over. It was actually my rear license plate light wasn't working. And as a drug dealer, I was very militant about everybody checking all their equipment. I forbade a lot of my guys from driving between certain hours, like not before like 6 o'clock in the morning, because it's not unusual for people to be going to and from work at that time. And also anything beyond about 1:30, 2 o'clock, you're just asking to get pulled over, especially if you're in a nice car or a crappy looking car. It's just the time. It's just the time. You can't get around it. So if you're going to be moving, for me, you're going to be moving my weight, you're going to be abiding by a few different rules that I had. This was ultimately for the benefit of the whole group. So I had these I was kind of strict. Yeah, it's kind of no wonder that I started a conspiracy, and ultimately am the reason why we were able to prosper enough for it to get to the level that it got. I take full responsibility when it comes to that, because if you just take a handful of average guys and give them an ounce of dope, chances are they're not coming back with enough to pay you or make an investment. They're going to do up most of it, if not at least half. They're probably going to come short of what you gave them, the pack for. And it's just this is just the way of it. There's only a handful of people out there that can actually take something small and minuscule and turn it into something that's, you know, suddenly you're looking at hundreds of thousands of dollars, you know, and that's what I did. I started with an 8 ball. I started with a $500 8 ball on consignment, and I ended up impressing my dealer enough to the point where he wanted to start giving me ounces, and that's a whole nother story. That's a whole. I'm getting way sidetracked. Sorry, but so to get back to where I was going, um, we ended up getting popped. You know, so when I told my guy, get rid of everything you got, don't have anything on you. We're gonna fucking lead these guys off somewhere. We're gonna see if they're really trying to pull us over. And so we were going through this whole rigmarole of, yeah, well, you know, I actually pulled you over for this and that, whatever. And finally, I told him I was from South Dakota. I was giving my friend a ride home. This isn't my car. This is a friend's car. It's not registered to me. It is actually my friend's car, so I wasn't lying about that. But when I told them that I was from South Dakota and that I didn't have my license on me, but I had a South Dakota's driver's license, he ran with that, went back to the cop car, you know, did his little thing, and they came back up, and then he came to the side of the door, and he said that my South Dakota's driver's license was suspended, and so that it would just be a couple $100 to bond out this and that. Now I know he's bullshitting, right? So I'm looking at the cop, and I'm like, okay, I see what's going on here. You know, you're just, you know, you're just saying whatever at this point. You know, you're obviously not going to. We're not playing by the book here. And so he got me out the car, and because I was driving under suspension, you know, he had full authority to, you know, search the vehicle, and as well as my passenger. Well, my passenger had stashed something in the glove compartment and locked it. He at least did that much. But I didn't know about that. So the cop, not to be dissuaded by, you know, something like warrants and probable cause and all that stuff, they went into the glove box, they unlocked it, and found his pack of cigarettes in there with eight balls of glass in there. So he jumps out, he arrests him, and at just on cue, all these undercover cars start pulling up. Cars that we had suspected were following us all day that day. We were vindicated. We actually were being followed, and they were following us in broad daylight. That's what was so trippy about it. You know, you add that to the fact that we haven't slept for days, and you know, we're already kind of disillusioned on whether or not we're actually large enough to be followed, if we're actually, you know what I mean? Because I used to always tell my guys, I'd say, who the fuck are you, man? What do you do? What do you do? I said, you fucking struggle to sell fucking 4 balls of glass. You come short. You're just doing it all up and fucking kicking it with friends and trying to get with fucking, you know, meth whores and shit. I was like, you know, I was dealing with a lot of people that weren't, you know, impressing anybody, especially me at the time. So I would have to kind of give them a little reality check and be like, you're nobody, you're nothing. Like your contribution towards this is very small. Like you're not fucking Tony Montana. Like, you know, and there was a reason that I did that, because paranoia is contagious. It is extremely contagious. And when you are living in the trap house or the safe house, I didn't run a trap house, not till much later, but when you were living in a safe house, you can't have people, you know, harboring these types of suspicions and looking out the window, and, you know, because then, you know, it's like you're already basically saying they're out there. They are out there. They're moving in. They're closing in. They're about to raid us. And if that's the case, then it's over with. Fuck it. Do as much drugs as you can while you can, you know. And I was very different, you know. And that's a story for another day, a whole another video. But to make the long story short, we go to jail. We get arrested. They end up putting him back in the same cop car as I was in. And they had already questioned him. You know, these plainclothes detectives were standing out there. They're doing the little field test, and and they're questioning him. And they finally bring him back to the cop car, and they sit him inside. And he looks over at me, and he goes to say something, and I said, "Don't say a fucking word, dude." I said, "It's no accident that we're in here together." I said, "Shut the fuck up. When we get to jail, I'll get us out." And he was like, he just sat there, and I'm looking at him, right? And I could tell he's scared, right? Like, I knew what I was doing. I knew what I got myself into. I knew that this was, a part of the ball game. I'd already educated myself on everything that I needed to know, so I knew. I actually knew. But a lot of people don't. They don't take it that far. They just assume they're never going to get caught. No, I looked up the risks, the dangers, the laws, traffic laws, all that stuff. That wasn't below me. So I was already up on that. And I looked at him and I said, "What'd they say to you?" And he looked over at me in a way that I just knew. I saw it right then and there. He looks at me, he said, "They told me that you said it was mine." And I just looked at him, and I'm like, you know they haven't talked to me yet, right? I was like, "You know that, right? They haven't talked to me yet." And I seen it cross his face that never occurred to him. It never occurred to him that I've been in the car since we were still under the pretense that this was just a driving under suspension stop. They've never brought me out the car since all these people pulled up, and all the questioning started, and they got him out there handcuffed, pulling off his shoes, turning them inside out, looking through his cap. They're just grilling him. And so, and I'm like, "They haven't talked to me yet, man." And he was like, "Oh yeah." And I'm like, this dude's scared. But we had been up for like 3 weeks. I'm not even joking. When you're sitting on pounds, literally pounds, 3-4 pounds, hundreds of thousands of dollars, you're not going to sleep. Not willingly. I only slept because of it's a thing called total system body shutdowns, and you have no control over when those take place. It could be at a red light, stop sign, parking lot, somebody's couch with money in your lap, with your front door wide open. Yeah, I fell asleep. I came right into my house one time and I passed out. My front door was wide open, my keys, my phone, everything was just all looked like I just flopped right where I was, and everything scattered. I woke up 6-7 hours later and my door was still open and it was night out. That's crazy. Nobody came in though. nobody called the cops or anything, and had any concerns. So we go to jail, and they tried scaring me. They pulled me out. They tried scaring me. I stuck to my story. He'd already admitted that those were his cigarettes. And he admitted that he smoked menthols. And then when they asked him, he was like, Marlboro menthols. And then he didn't have a cigarette pack on him. I had cigarettes on me. I smoked Camel Turkish Royals at the time, and I had my cigarettes on me. And they checked for that when they brought me out of the car. They said, "You smoke?" And I said, "Yeah." They said, "Do you have cigarettes on you?" And I said, "Yeah, I do." They pulled them out. They looked inside of it. And they're like, "Do you know what kind of cigarettes your friend smokes?" And I said, "No, I don't." They're like, "Is that, you sure that's your friend?" I was like, "I'm not from around here, man. I'm just giving him a ride home." I was asked to give him a ride home in my friend's car. They're all like, "Well, have you ever heard the captain goes down with the ship, this and that, blah, 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 blah." I was like, "Look, man, I don't know what's going on. I don't know what you guys found. It's not my car. I didn't give you guys consent to search it." I was like, "You guys are only supposed to be able to fucking search within immediate reach of the driver. I was like, if you guys went into anything locked, I said, it's going to get thrown out. I said, other than that, I said, I don't know. I don't know. I'm sticking to my story. I don't know anything. And, they tried. They really did. They really tried to make it sound like I was about to go down for AAA felonies or some shit. Class A for sure. Class A felonies, doubles maybe. And they waited. That was another thing. They waited to pull us over next to a school. That's why it was relevant that they followed us for like a mile and a half before claiming the reason why they pulled us over. So, yeah. So we went to jail and we fell asleep. And when we fell asleep, they woke us up. Now, I don't know how many of you out there know what it's like trying to talk sense to somebody who's been up for even more than a handful of days, and you forcefully wake them up and you're trying to question them and get some sense out of them, and it's a nightmare. They are absolutely not coherent. They are not coherent at all. Not for a while. You might even have to give them some more drugs for them to really snap out of it. It's just such a delirious state. They don't know if this is real or not. It's just not. It's not a time to be giving official statements and debriefings, right? So they came for me. They go to question me. I just vaguely remember watching my feet being dragged down this hallway and being sat upright into a chair and forcefully shaken awake. And so when I finally started waking up and realizing where I was in some weird little room that had a lot of little buttons and lights on it. I guess it was some kind of control room or something. I believe there was a two-way mirror in there as well. I don't know, but the cop was sitting there trying to question me. And he was basically saying that they already had everything they needed as far as information. They just wanted to see whether or not I would corroborate it. And I'm like, look, I don't know what the fuck you guys are talking about, man. And I remember he was getting frustrated because I was playing stupid, and I knew that as long as I stuck to my guns, I already had my story, laid out. I knew what I would say, how I would say it, all that, but I didn't expect to be woken up in the middle of the night. And I remember him saying something like, yeah, he goes, yeah, right now they're knocking on the judge's house right now to get him to sign the search warrant for your guys' safe house. And I looked up at him and I'm like, safe house? I said, the fuck are you talking about? Safe house, man. I said, I don't know what the fuck you're talking about. He's like, oh yeah, up on so he checked his notes and he goes, on Memorial Drive. And I'm like, I'm thinking, right, I'm like, who do we know that lives on Memorial Drive? And I was like, I know exactly who that is. It's like, that's the guy that I got arrested with. That was basically his main squeeze's house. And it wasn't a safe house, but it was his main squeeze's house. It was somewhere that we would hang out. So we had helped her move out of there days before this happened. There wasn't nothing in that house. There's not a fucking old fucking packet of mustard in the fucking refrigerator to find. It is nothing there. And now this cop has told me that he believes it's a safe house. And so I'm looking at him, I'm like, go ahead. Go ahead. Raid that motherfucker. I said, see what I fucking care, man. I said, I don't know what you're talking about. I don't know what's going on. I don't know what you found. It's not mine. I was like, I don't know anything, man. I was like, just take me back to my cell. And he got mad, right? Yeah, I remember he slapped the table and he said something like he was going to make sure that I went down for, they were on to me, all this other shit. And I guess they really were, right? But they couldn't prove it, and they weren't getting me to play along, so that was pissing them off. And so they take me back to my room. Now, I ended up sitting in jail for about a month and a half before I finally got my discovery. And in that time, my friend had gotten out. He'd already gotten out. He was already out on bond, and yeah, he was already out on bond. And he was leaving me messages, and he was like, "Yeah, man, somebody told on us, and blah 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 and stuff. I'll tell you more. I'm trying to get you out." I had I think it was like a 50G bond, cash only, and I told them, "Do not pay that shit." I was like, "Do not pay that shit." I said, "I will get these charges dropped." And the guy that went down for my ringleader, the ringleader enhancement in our case, he was like, I'll come and get you. He's like, I'm coming to get you. And I'm like, "No, dude." I was like, "Don't do it. Don't do it." I was like, "I'm telling these people I don't know anything. I'm not a part of anything. I'm not even from here. But I got 50 G's like that to get out. Come on, man." I said, "Let me handle this. I will get these charges dropped." And he was like, "All right." So he did. And when I finally got my discovery, right there in black and white, it detailed out and very, very descriptive. I read it like a fucking James Patterson novel. My friend was brought to the same room before I was. And he told him everything. He said, "Yeah, we were big time drug dealers, and all the money we had was from drug proceeds, and we've been doing it for a while, and we move a lot of weight." And he was gone, right? He was fucking serenading them. He was serenading the fuck out of them cops. And I'm reading this and I'm like, "What the fuck, man?" I was like, "What the fuck?" Because he had like $5,000 on him or something like that. I had like 4,000 on me, and I gave it to him because the cop said to give it to him because he would need it to bond me out depending on what my bond was. So I handed him the wad of money that I had on me. That's all I had, and he put it in his pocket, and then he got wrapped up for possession with intent to deliver, because the grams and stuff were all separated in 2 different wraps of 8 balls. So that money was gone, right? And that was just a drop in the bucket compared to what we had access to. But man, so I'm reading this and I'm like, "What the fuck, man? What is wrong with this dude?" And I continued reading, and like it started to turn, right? His testimony started to throw me off because he was like, "Yeah, we were this, we were that," and then he went into super detailed descriptions, like pulling up the carpet, counting over so many floorboards, lifting this one up, and lift, and like reaching underneath, and there was another space that was in the closet, and just like he went off, right? He told them in great detail these hiding spaces that in reality did not exist. And he told them that house was our safe house, it was our home base, and all this stuff. And so they were eating this up, writing it down, and they were just like, "Oh yeah, and so when they brought me in and they thought that I was going to corroborate any of that, but I just stuck to my guns, they got pissed off, threatened me, and said I was going to go down for a bunch of time and stuff, kick me out. And so now I'm sitting there in my cell and I'm like, well, I know for a fact now that I'm getting these charges dropped, because ultimately they raided that house at like 4-5 o'clock that morning. Back, this is like a month and a half later that I'm reading it, but the night this happened, they kicked that door in at like 5 in the morning, executed this search warrant, and that place was desolate. Nothing there. There was nothing there to be found. And so it made them look stupid as fuck, and it put him in their crosshairs. Because now they're like, you made us look stupid. You sent us on a wild goose chase. You said that that was the safe house, and it wasn't. So what? Do you guys have some kind of code or something to clear it out before it happens? And he was just like, nah, you know. And I don't really know what he said because I wasn't there. All I know is the next time they brought me into court, they dropped all the charges except for a deferred sentence for a concealed weapon. I had a knife, a butterfly knife, a gravity knife on me that he had to find after the fact. So I took a deferred sentence, like 18-month deferred sentence for that, and I walked out of court that day. Well, my buddy wasn't off the hook. And the people that were up here from Colorado who had ties to something larger, a lot larger, they were planted up here in North Dakota, and I had to report to them when I got out. And you best believe I brought my paperwork. I brought big old stack of Discovery. It was kind of a big stack as it was, even for that, you know, little month and a half that I sat there and waited for them to figure everything out, that they had nothing on me. And yeah, the guy that they sent basically up there to keep tabs on me, he read it. And when he read it, he basically told me I had to get rid of this guy, if you know what I mean. You know, YouTube and all that. But I had to take care of him. And I said, yeah, I know. I'll deal with it. I said, I don't need you up here breathing down my neck and all that shit. I'll handle it. I will decide when and how, if I'm going to, and where it'll happen. I was like, as far as I'm concerned, that's all you guys need to know. And he was like, yeah, I don't, he goes, I don't want to know. I don't need to know. Just let me know when it's done. He goes, until then, I'm going to hold on to this. And he took my paperwork with him. They made copies of it. Lots of copies. And then, you know, I ended up finding out about that a long time later because I was eventually sought out by an up-and-coming cook, backyard chemist, that only wanted to deal with one person only. And that was somebody that had already stood, you know, stood the test. Because it was. I remember the big thing about my paperwork is that right there in the paperwork, I had told the cop I would give him a bunch of fake names and fake addresses if that made him happy, so I could go back to my room and go to sleep. When I found somebody, some random stranger that had copies of it, that part was highlighted. And I became something of a little bit of a celebrity because of that in the drug world. And I was given a lot of credibility because of that. Not a good thing. Definitely not a good thing. But I did see it. It did, you know, appeal to my ego at the time. So anyways, I had to know. I had to know what happened that night. What the fuck was going through your head? You know, like what I had to know before I could do anything, before I would decide if I really was going to go down that route. I had to know, because in one sense, what he said did expose me. But in the other sense, what he said also liberated me. So I was at a little bit of a crossroads. I didn't really know what to do or how to go about it. But he disappeared. He definitely disappeared, and I'm very grateful that I wasn't able to find him. He surfaced after like months later. I ran into him at a party we were drinking. I was drinking and I was, party hopping and stuff, and I ended up running into him one night. This is after everything had already crumbled, right? This whole little empire that we had created had crumbled, and everybody was scattered to the four winds. Some were on the run, some were already caught, some were hiding. I was just floating around waiting to get picked up, really. I wasn't running, I wasn't hiding, I was just waiting. So I ended up running into him at a party. And when I ran into him, I was super drunk, and I'm very different when I'm drunk. And I wasn't under any type of, pressure to still carry out what I was supposed to do, because that person was already gone. The person that was up here, that was more or less the only one that would hold me accountable, he was already gone. They had already rolled him up. They swatted him and ran up into his safe house, took everything he had. But I ended up running into him, and the first thing he says to me was that he fucked up. And so right away I was like, I'm listening. I was like, I've been waiting to hear this for a while, and I'm listening. And he was like, yeah, man. He goes, I was just out of it. He goes, I was out of it. I didn't even know what was really going on. He was like, it felt like a dream. He goes, that, and somebody was asking me questions, and I thought I was just talking. I thought I was just talking like at the table with the bros and stuff. He was like, and he goes, I started to kind of come to, and I realized that these are cops sitting here. And he was like, and I'm like, fuck. And they're like, what happened after that? And he was like, what do you all got so far? He's like, read back to me what you got so far, so I can, he wanted to know what he told him already. And basically they were like, well, you told us that you are drug dealers, and both of you are drug dealers, and you guys are big ballers and have a lot of money and have access to all this dope and have been doing it for a while. And he was like, he sat there and he thought to himself, he's like, I gotta do something now. I gotta blow my credibility somehow. And so he, concocted this fake safe house story right there on the spot, in the middle of, halfway giving them a genuine, authentic debriefing. He just slipped this in and ran with it, and knew that it would blow back and blow his credibility, and it would get me out. And I gotta tell you, I mean, whether it was the truth or not, I never did find out. But I was like, God damn, that's believable, because I was there. I remember coming to at the table and realizing, like, what the fuck, like, I can't even recall what happened up to this point, because I was just so foggy, so fucking foggy. It's unreal. And so then we kind of started kicking it that same night. He told me that, and so I continued to drink wherever we were, drinking with him. And somewhere out of nowhere, he goes, I know where I know where somebody is that was close to you, and I seen paperwork on them. They're a snitch now. They're working for the feds. And I was like, there's one of these guys that they grew up with me. And I went out of my way to try to keep them out of the drug game. And that was out of respect for his older brother, who I'm talking about. I'm not going to name him. But I'll call him Dirty D, right? Dirty D. Those close enough will know. But Dirty D's older brother came to me and he said, look, man, you know, I already know about this life. I've already had my run-ins with it. He's like, just do me a favor and don't let my brother, you know, get into it because of you. If he's going to get into it, he's going to have to get into it the hard way, not through you. And I said, bet. He won't get it from me. I can guarantee you that. And I did. I chased him away and I told him that this was something that I don't think you know what you're doing. You don't know what you're getting yourself into. Well, he forced it anyway. He forced it anyway, and he found himself getting set up in a hotel room and getting caught with a lot of somebody's product. And so basically he felt like he had to, right? He didn't think he'd get caught. And now he finds himself at the mercy of whatever DEA agent is willing to work with him and send him back out there to, set somebody else up. So I took that very personal because I told you to stay out of this. And you did this because you don't think that there's somebody out there that will show you there are consequences to this. I was like, well, you fucked around and you chose the right one because now I am going to hold you accountable for what you've done now. If you don't think anybody else will, I will, because now you're stepping into my world and you are something that I strongly oppose. I have to. No one else is going to. It is on me. That's how I felt at the time. So when he told me that he had somebody who had the paperwork that would prove to me that somebody I grew up with was working for the police, I went dark. I saw red, and I went dark, and I said, take me there now. And so he jumped up, and we jumped into a car, and we took off to somebody else's house, and they busted out their discovery, and I read it. And sure enough, it confirmed everything that Trevor had told me. And so I was like, damn, man, this dude really is. He went, he went all the way. He went and found a way to do exactly what I didn't want, and that was to get into the dope game and now become a fucking informant in the dope game. This kid was like my brother. He is like my brother, and I couldn't have that. I couldn't have that at all. And I found out where he was staying. The house that was currently opening their doors to him and allowing him to freeload off their couch. So I asked my friend, who I had just recently started, kicking it with again. This is all the same night that I ran into him and he told me that he had to blow his credibility. We're all still drinking. And I am not a nice drunk. I'm not a nice drunk at all. I get downright fucking stupid. People want to get dumb. I'll get stupid when I'm drunk. And it's nothing to do with liquid courage or anything like that. I just, my tolerance for bullshit is far lower. It's far lower when I drink. Well, I told my friend, I said, you got a couple guys that are willing to put in some work tonight. he's like, what kind of work? I said, masks and guns. And he said, yeah, I got a couple guys. I said, okay. I said, call them up, get a car. I said, somebody else's car, obviously. I said, get a car. I said, like, and then come and get me. And we're going to go over here, and we're going to get this kid. And he's like, what are we going to do? And I said, I don't know yet. I haven't decided that yet. I said, but he's coming for a ride. He's going to come for a ride with us out into the country. I'm probably going to make him dig his own fucking grave. And he was like, all right, cool. And he did. He came and he pulled up with two other guys. And they had ski masks and, you know, bandanas over their faces and stuff. And they handed me a gun. We jumped in the car. And we took off up to where he was supposedly staying, this kid that I grew up with. We come walking into the house where it's like a duplex or something, or like a triplex. I don't know, but all I know was the hallway was like an actual house hallway. So it's very narrow. And the door that we were concerned about was on the left. When my friend went to go and kick the door, it was so narrow that when his leg came up, it got pinned against his chest, and he wasn't able to actually, you know, kick the door. So I was like, move, get out the way. And I put both my feet against the door, and I basically leg pressed the door off of its hinges. Wood cracked, and the deadbolt gave, and the whole door blew in. And I landed hard on my ass. Bah! And they all went running over me. Like a fucking, it was like a raid. We literally raided this house. And it was supposed to be, you know, like just a drug house, right? Just somewhere where everybody knows they can come here and probably get high just based off somebody there having something. So they run in, and they're doing a quick sweep. They knew to basically run in there, secure whoever was there, and go room to room until we found who we were looking for. The only people that were in the house were in the very front, and it was a man and a woman. And unfortunately, they were alone, probably for the first time, and they were doing what a man and woman do when they like each other. You know, they were in the middle of that. And so when we came running in, the girl freaked out, like, because we had flashlights and we're armed. So she freaks out and immediately spins off the bed against the wall and fell into the little crack between the bed and the wall. And she grabbed the sheet and pulled the sheet over herself. And the dude was left butt ass right there in the middle of the bed, trying to, one, cover his junk, and two, put his hand in front of his eyes so that he could see what was going on. And he didn't know which of the two he wanted to do more. I just remember that. And I'm like, I stepped in, and he was trying to cover it. He's trying to cover himself, and finally he grabbed the pillow and he put it over his stuff. And I remember he was trying to cover the light, and I reached forward and I smacked him. And I said, "What the fuck are you trying to look at?" I said, "Do you want to see our face?" And he was like, "No, I'm good. I'm sorry. I won't look again." And he just sat there and he let these flashlights, you know, sit on his face. And I leaned down next to him and I said, "Where is Dirty D?" And he said, I don't know. He goes, "I don't know. He doesn't live here." And the girl was on the side of the bed and she was still freaking out. I told somebody to let her cover herself and take her out into the living room. And so somebody did. They went and they grabbed her. They allowed her to, you know, wrap herself in such a way, and they took her out into the living room. And I told them both, I said, "My beef isn't with you guys." I said, "But you guys are housing this person." And I said, "And I have a problem with this person." I said, now I come to find he's not here. I need you guys to get him here right now, like now. And he's like, I don't know where he's at. And you know, he goes, you know, he goes from Wi-Fi to Wi-Fi. I don't know if Wi-Fi was a thing back in the day. I think it was minutes. I don't know if he had enough minutes or whatever. But he he said he needed his phone so that he could call him. And I said, get him his phone. So they went and they found him his phone. They brought it to him. And I'm like, you know, I'm leaning down on my haunches next to them because they just had a bed on the floor. And he's still not allowed to move. He's still sitting there with the pillow over his junk. And he's dialing the phone, and I'm listening, and I could hear I told him to put it on the speaker, so I could hear it ringing, and it goes straight to voicemail. And then it goes straight to voicemail, and he's like panicking. This guy's super flustered right now, right? Super freaked out. Completely understandable. But he goes, I can't get a hold of him. I can't get a hold of him, this and that. And I said, all right. I said, well, listen, dude. I said, relax. You're good. All right. I said, we're going to leave. We're going to leave right now. You and your girl are cool. You'll never see us again. I was like, but I said, when he comes back here, you show him. I said, you show him what happened here. You tell him what happened here. And you let him know that I'm looking for him. I said, and if I come to find out that you're allowing him to stay here again, I said, I'm going to come back. And he was like, he's gone. He's gone. He's never allowed here again. He's like, I promise you, dude. He goes, he's gone. I'm throwing all this shit out the house tonight. I said, okay, take care. And we got up and we left. That's the individual that I saw in the gas station. Now I know I had heard somewhere down the grapevine that he did find out that it was me. I don't know how, or you know, how much longer later or whatever. But you know, I kind of always thought that my city was bigger than it was. I kind of always thought that somebody out there was doing bigger things than I was. I thought there was bigger ice dealers out there. I thought there was people that were fighting more than me out there. Like I really did think that I wasn't the worst. There's no way I could be the worst. I can't. I'm just one guy. You know, I'm one guy. But now at that time there wasn't a lot of people that were willing to do stuff like that. And I was, and people knew I was. They knew I was willing to do stuff like that since I was a teenager. I was doing home invasions at a young age, a very young age. So armed home invasions long after, not entirely out the realm of possibility. I ended up finding that kid. That same night I ran into him. But that's definitely a story for another day. But you would understand now a little better, I would hope, why running into him at the gas station and assuming that he would want to see me, that he would want some get back. That's definitely understandable now, right? That's not something a person's ever going to forget or forgive. I don't think he ever forgave me. But he did leave. He did leave. When I walked out the gas station that day, he was gone. And I'll never know what he was going to say. He could have said anything, I don't know. But maybe he thought to himself that he let me make it. He probably did. He probably did let me make it. Who knows? But there's a lot of things out there like that that I have to live with. Things that I'm not proud of. And from a lifetime that I'm definitely just not the same person anymore. And that's no excuse. It doesn't absolve me from accepting responsibility for the choices I made. It's just one of those things. Comes with the territory. But if you're new here, subscribe, leave a like, comment. Let me know if there's any kind of stories y'all want to hear. Until then, take care.